Let me tell you of the days of high adventure.
Hey there nation, welcome to the show. We help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander CheapSkate, and we are proud to present to you our very first battle report for our brand new series, Mighty Empires. Mighty Empires, in case you guys didn't know that, used to be a campaign system that was actually created by Games Workshop for the 8th edition of Warhammer Fantasy Battle. The idea was that you play on a hexagonal shaped map, you go about conquering territories, increasing the size of your armies, and after so many cycles and turns, see which of your players was the most reigning supreme general in this campaign system. So because of that, we've already uploaded a video for the very first turn of our Border Princess campaign, and so with that being said, this brings us to our very first battle report. This battle report is fought between my friend King Khalifa of the Schwarzwald Free Companies of the Empire versus yours truly of the Order of the Grey Wardens of the High Elves. So this one is actually kind of an interesting battle report because in this campaign series, I am the game master for this one. So because of that, all the neutral forces that the various players will have to fight against me. So because of that, my buddy King Khalifa, his Empire army is fighting against the neutral High Elf forces for controls of hexes number 60 and 61, which are a series of woods as well as cities that are used for the campaign map. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to play some background music real quick, show you exactly what each army is bringing for this one. If you want to see exactly what each side is taking, please feel free to pause and take a look at your own leisure. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's get this on a roll. Alright, so let's go and talk about the scenario rules real quick. For this one, it's actually pretty simple. It's just a normal battle line type of battle report. So the idea is that both sides will fight against each other until one side is defeated, in which case will determine whether or not the Schwarzwald Free Companies will gain the 2 hexes for King Khalifa's empire in our Mighty Empires campaign. As you can see, we are fighting on a 4x4 table. On the far side of the table, we have a wall that's supposed to represent the edge of the city that the empire is trying to invade and take away from the High Elves. We got a tower in that back left corner. We got standing stones dominating the center of the battlefield. We also got hills as well as trees, so as you can see, it's a nice little mix of terrain. We're fighting on a 4x4 table because the military force is around 1,300 points, so it's not large enough to have a 6x4 battlefield, so we're using the 4x4 on this one to fight out for this battle report. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's go and talk about the battle plan to show exactly where all the forces are located at. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about the battle plan. As you can see, I'm deployed on the far side of the table. My opponent, King Khalifa, is deployed on the near side. As you can see, pretty much the idea is that since my opponent is the one that has to attack in order to gain this city, he's got to pick the offense on this part. So my goal here is pretty much twofold. As you saw in my previous army list, my army is pretty much divided in half. The idea was that I have one half of my army being my shooting portion of my army, while the other half is my spearmen with my lore master as well as my battle standard bearer using Moranians waste shards. That way they can become ambushers to attack the back end of this Empire forces. Because my opponent has cavalry for primarily making most of his list, my plan is to occupy that wall so that way his cavalry is kind of useless because cavalry can't really fight inside of buildings. So the idea is to have my opponent come towards me, try to take out my suppressive elements along the wall where my bolt throwers and my archers are located at, and as he's doing that, I then summon up my spearmen to the back ranks to kind of get him in a pincer attack to kind of destroy him that way as well. He does have more troops than I do, both in terms of number as well as point value, so kind of spreading him out and having me pick and choose my battles is pretty much what I'm kind of going for in this battle report. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and talk about where our deployment zones are located at. Alright, so let's go and start with King Khalifa's deployment area. On the left-hand side here, he has his Vagrant Brotherhood. I'm sorry, not his Vagrant Brotherhood. That's his the Wanderers, I believe is what they're called. That's his unit of 10 cavalry. There's regular Lector Count type of cavalry. They're also armed with great weapons instead of lances. So that makes the deployment here on the left-hand side. In his center deployment area is where you see the bulk of his forces. On the left-hand side, he has Blitzen, which is his Hellblaster volley gun. He's also got his Vagrant Brotherhood, which is his 10 knights armed with great weapons. And on the right-hand side, he's got his infantry forces. He has the Blue Company, which is 20 halberdiers with his level 4 life wizard, Victor Hellsbrad of the Wilds. He's located in that unit. Right in front of them, of course, he has his detachment of 10 archers. And the right-hand side, he's got his detachment of 10 handgunners as well. So pretty solid center lines for his army. And finally, make up the right-hand flank of his army, he has Donner, which is his great cannon, and that pretty much stationed up there on top of the hill. And that pretty much makes the deployment for King Khalifa's army on this one. Alright, so let's go and talk about my deployment real quick for the High Elves. Up on here on the left-hand side along that wall, I have my archers, the Wanderers. Just a unit of 24 archers armed with longbows, so pretty good, solid chunk of troops. If my opponent decides to shoot at me, he's got a deuce at a -1 to hit because I'm behind cover. Plus, he has, of course, that huge open range where I can start laying down some long-range fire with him as well. Also, if you notice in the background as well, I also got one of my Eagle Call bullet throwers kind of stationed out there in the back of the tower. And making my right-hand deployment on the other side of the wall, I got my 2 other Eagle Call bullet throwers. Like I said before, the idea is have my opponent advance towards me. I'm just going to start shooting to pieces with my long-range firepower as best I can before I spring the trap with my spearmen. And off on the side of the table, I have my unit of spearmen as well, the Wayward Sons. I have more Moranian the Wayward. That's my battle standard bearer. He's a noble. He's got Moranian waste shards. That way this unit can attack from the ambush situation as well. Also deployed with this unit as well is my general. That is my Lore Master. That is Silent Shrike. He is equipped with a Shadow Armor as well as a Dispel Scroll. So, Shadow Armor as well as the Book of Asher, so that way he gets +1 to his dispels as well as his casting totals. And I gave him the Shadow Armor so that way he can deploy with his unit and also launch an ambush as well to my enemy's back. So this is being my force of 25 spearmen that will kind of like act as the attacking of the back of him, so that way I can get my opponent fully enveloped. Alright, so with deployment over with, we go directly to the top of turn number 1 for the High Elves. I managed to go first in this battle report, and this photo is taken after the movement phase, and as you can see, nothing pretty much moves in my army. My plan is to make my opponent advance towards me, so that way I can shoot into pieces at the same time. I have a lot more shooting elements in my army than he does. His army is more based for close combat, so because of that, I'm just going to stay exactly where I am and just continue on shooting. Unfortunately for me though, because my magic user is deployed off the side of the table because he's coming with my ambushers, I'm unable to use any magic phase, so with magic phase out the wind, we go ahead and go straight to the shooting phase. Alright, so in the shooting phase, as you can see in this photo, I concentrate fire with my 24 archers against his skirmishing archer units, so that way that leaves his halberdiers nice and vulnerable. As you can see, I managed to kill 8 of those guys, leaving only 2 guys left over. Now, under normal circumstances, these guys will have to take a leadership test to see if they panic, but because they're part of the detachment rule system for the Empire, they don't have to worry about running out too much. I then concentrate fire with all 3 of my bolt throwers. I open it with multiple shots, making 18 shots onto that unit of knights. Managed to kill 5 of those guys as well. They have to take a panic check, but luckily for King Khalifa, those guys aren't going anywhere. So pretty successful round of shooting in my opinion. Because I have nothing engaged in close combat, we go directly to the bottom of turn number 1. This photo is taken after the move phase. As you can see, my buddy King Khalifa starts moving up his forces very, very rapidly in order to start engaging my forces. The very first thing he does, if you notice, he takes his cavalry units, he puts them behind those standing stones, which is actually kind of a smart idea because the way he has those forces laid out in those standing stones and the way that my shooters are located at, my bolt throwers will not be able to hit his cavalry units at all. Which is kind of a good thing because, you know, they really can't engage in close combat because they really can't occupy buildings, so that kind of saves me the hassle. What that does, however, do is let me target his nice soft infantry units, which I'm planning on trying to do and breaking his back on that part as well. As you can see as well, he also marches up his infantry units in a kind of like a column formation straight towards the gatehouse. He's got his skirmishers leading up front with his handgunners on the right hand side, as well as his magic user, as well as his halberdiers right behind them. And then obviously his 2 artillery pieces stay exactly where they're at because they have no reason to move. During the magic phase, however, my buddy King Khalifa, his general Victor Hellsbrow of the Wilds, just totally dominates the magic phase. As you can see in the photo, the very first thing he does, he casts himself Throne of Vine, so that way he can start using that ability to buff up his spells. The next thing that he decides to do is use Flesh to Stone ability, which in that case it gives his halberdiers as well as attached units +4 for their toughness. So now these guys are at toughness 7, which means my longbows are ineffective, as well as the multiple shots on my bolt throwers. So if I really want to have a good chance of winning, I have to do solid shots against those guys, and that's not going to be working out very well to my favor. At the same time, he also casts Regrowth off onto his Vagrant Brotherhood, which is over there on the right hand side, and because he's using the boosted version due to Throne of Vines, he actually causes D6 +1 wounds to come back. As you can see, those guys all came back to a man, so all that long range firepower that I used eventually just went away as he's naturally pretty much bowed back from the dead. So pretty demoralizing, but you know, it's what to be expected when you're dealing with a life wizard. So the magic phase over, we go directly to the shooting phase. As you can see, he opens up with Blitzen first, manages to get 22 shots off with the Hellblaster volley gun, and he aims all 22 shots at my archers along the walls, so that's pretty terrifying. And after it's all said and done, with the combined fire of his from Blitzen, his Hellblaster volley gun, as well as his 2 archers, I managed to lose, I think, 9 members of my archers when it's all said and done. Unfortunately for me, though, I had to take a panic test, but I got kind of lucky. My guys kind of stood their ground, so not really going anywhere. But man, those shots were really, really devastating. Even with the -1 to hit because of the ramparts, my buddy King Cleaver kind of rolled out of the box in that part. So very, very devastating for my archer units. And to make matters worse, my buddy also managed to take out one of my bolt throwers with this cannon Donner as well. That just atomized my bolt thrower like it was nobody's business, and that was absolutely devastating. So with the shooting phase over, we go directly to the combat phase, and since no one's engaged in close combat, that pretty much ends up turn number 1. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we go directly to the top of turn number 2. Alright, so we go to the top of turn number 2 for the High Elves. This photo is taken after the move phase. As you can see, for most of my forces along the wall, they're not really going anywhere because my plan is to keep my shooters exactly where they're at. However, when I do roll a d6 for my ambushes, I roll a 4 up. So because of that, my ambushes show up. So my little column of spearmen with my Lord Master as well as Battle Center Bearer pops up the back ranks of my enemy's main lines. So it's kind of nice because now I can get these guys stuck in a pincer attack and hopefully kind of cause some problems for them as well. Unfortunately for me, though, my plan of actually destroying this unit, my opponent's cavalry with long range fire, kind of hit a snag because of that life spell that brought back all those knights. So I do have my work cut out for me on this one, so we'll see exactly what happens from that point on. In the magic phase, I did manage to get 10 magic dice, so I had a really powerful magic phase. I did try to cast Searing Doom onto that unit of knights on the left-hand side, but unfortunately for me, though, my opponent used one of his Dispel Scrolls in order to stop that from happening. I then took the rest of my dice and cast the 18+ level 3 boosted spell of Fireball and launched it right directly at the Hellblaster volley gun. Managed to burn that thing to ashes, and so that entire unit was destroyed right off the bat. So now I don't have to worry about that Hellblaster volley gun causing problems anymore. Unfortunately for me, however, my shooting was totally ineffective during this phase. I was able to hit anything or wound anything because of all the boosted up toughness that these units had from that Flesh to Stone ability. And since nothing's really engaged in close combat, that pretty much makes up my entire turn, which is pretty uneventful. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we go back to the bottom of turn number 2 for the Empire. Okay, so that takes the bottom of turn number 2 for the Empire, and as you can see in this photo, it pretty much the plan that I had originally envisioned, where I was going to destroy his cavalry units with some long-range firepower from my bolt throwers, has clearly failed. As you can see, this is like the worst possible situation I can find myself in. My opponent decides to take both of his cavalry units and turn them 180 degrees around, doing a swift reform movement. So you can see that they're still behind the rocks, so they can't be shot at with the bolt throwers, but that kind of also puts them in a really good position to catch my unit of spearmen into a L-shaped kind of like attack, where he has his Vagrant Brotherhood charging the front and his other unit on there on the left hand side charging the flank as well, which is kind of a bad situation, so I'm not looking forward to that. At the same time, he also keeps his handgunners where they're located at, so that way they can provide overwatch fire while he advances up his column of halberdiers as well as his 2 skirmishing archers as well. And that pretty much makes up his move phase for this part. Alright, so then we go directly to the magic phase. As you can see in this photo, my opponent does a couple of things. First of all, he casts off Thorn of Vines again, so he manages to get that boost up as well. Also casts Flesh to Stone, so because of that, him and his attachment units also gain 4 up to their toughness, so they're very, very tough. My opponent then tries to cast Regrowth again onto his skirmishing unit, and he does get it off. If you notice, he has 3 6s on that part, so because of that, he does miscast. So we do, of course, the normal roll. All of his archers come back, including the 1 archers that he got for every single spell that he got back as well. So kudos to my opponent, but unfortunately for my buddy King Khalifa, he has to roll off on the miscast table.
Klaatu! Narada!
However, because he decided to cast Thorn of Vines ahead of time, what ends up happening on that spell is every single time you miscast, you roll a single d6, and on a 2 up, you ignore the miscast result. In this case, my buddy King Khalifa rolled a 4, so because of that, he doesn't have to worry about doing the miscast roll on this part either. And because my buddy's magic just doesn't quit in this battle report, he also casts off Shield of Thorns onto his unit of skirmishing archers as well. So now those guys are protected with a strength 4 wall of magical thorns. So even if I do decide to charge into that unit, there's really much I can't do against that unit because I'll be taking strength 4 hits. And everyone knows as elves only have a toughness of 3, so I'm not going to be going any of that against that unit in close combat either. So yeah, pretty powerful magic phase for my buddy. He's just dominating on the magic phase in this game. Alright, so with all that said and done, we then go directly to the shooting phase. As you can see in this photo, my buddy opens up with both his handgunners as well as his archers. Even though they get that -1 to hit because they're shooting at my guys behind cover, they do manage to kill a couple more of my archers as well, which causes my archers to take a panic test. As you can see in those 2 6-sided dice on my formation tray there, I roll a 9. High Elves archers have a leadership of only 8, so because of that, my guys have to take a panic test and flee. And unfortunately for me, I rolled an 11, so because of that, my archers just take off for the hills and they run for their lives trying to survive from the onslaught that the Empire is kind of bringing to me on this part. So that was pretty devastating as well. And to make things worse, my buddy King Khalifa takes aim with Donner. His great cannon manages to blast away my very last bolt thrower here on my right hand side. So now all my shooting elements are pretty much evaporated. All I really have left is a single Eagle Claw bolt thrower on the tower that's behind these castle walls. So things are not going very well for me on this battle report. And since nobody's engaged in close combat, you go directly to the top of turn number 3 for the High Elves. This photo is taken after the movement phase. As you can see in this photo, I decided to charge at this point because there's no way in heck I'm going to win out this battle report. So now all I'm trying to do now is just cause casualties for my opponents. So you can see in the bottom of the page there, I charge in my unit of spearmen directly into his Vagan Brotherhood, engage those guys in close combat. That's kind of like a smart move because it also takes me out of the charge arc for his left-hand unit of knights to come charging at me. If I'm really lucky, I could break this unit of knights. Hopefully I can pursue and overrun and kill these knights, and then I can sweep over to the left-hand side then and start engaging his infantry units one by one. Hopefully I can just destroy them that way with my higher weapon skill and my more elite troop choices. The thing though, I have to watch out for those cavalry guys because those guys are armed with great weapons and they'll just chew right through my army if I don't take care of this problem very, very quickly. Alright, so with that done, we go directly to the magic phase. The very first thing I try to do is try to cast the direct damage spell. I believe it's called Icewind Storm, I think is what that one is called. It's from the Lore of Heavens. I'll try and cast it off onto his unit of halberdiers. That way I could probably take out a couple of those guys. Unfortunately for me though, my buddy King Khalifa just beat my roll no problem when it came to his dispel. However, I did manage to get Weason's wild form off onto this unit as well, so now my spearmen and all the characters within it get +1 to their strength as well as their toughness, making these spearmen strength 4, which is really good, and also upping the toughness on my Lord Master as well as my battle center bearer, which is going to be really, really helpful, especially when it gets to the close combat phase in this bat rep. And the shooting phase, I also managed to kill 2 members of these knights over in the left-hand side using my Eagle Claw Blow Thrower. Ends up I had just enough to hit the front of the formation, so I went with multiple shots in that part. Only killed 2 knights. It's not very much, and wasn't enough to break this unit, but at this point, I take whatever dead bodies I can get my hands on at this point. So with that, we go directly to the combat phase. As you can see in this photo, it actually ended up being very, very devastating for my opponent on this combat phase. As you can see, he only managed to kill 3 of my troops. Unfortunately, my weapon skill was just too high for him. In exchange, I managed to kill 4 of his soldiers as well. When it was all said and done, my opponent had a combat score of 4, while I had a combat score of 10. So because of that, I ended up with a leadership difference of 6 on these guys. These guys leadership 8. So the only way these guys can basically stick around is if they roll snake eyes. So because of that, my buddy has to roll for his break test, which he fails, so he has to roll for his to flee, and I of course roll to chase after him because I'm trying to get out of the charge arc of that left-hand unit of knights. And as you can see, even with Swift Strike, my buddy only rolls a 7 while my guys roll an 8. So because of that, I move forward 8 inches, I overrun this unit of knights, and I just chop them down and murder them all as they flee away from me. which is also kind of nice because that means I get out of the charge arc from his knights. They really can't charge me from my flank anymore. However, when I moved up that many inches forward, what I didn't realize is if you notice at the top of the hill there on the right hand side, my opponent's cannon donner is looking straight at my forces, and he is within grape shot range. And I realized that maybe I made a huge tactical error by having my guys run past that cannon, because I just know my buddy King Khalifa, he's going to cut loose with that thing onto my spearmen, and that's going to be absolutely devastating when he does. And with that, we go directly to the bottom of turn number 3 after the move phase for the Empire. And as you can see in this photo, my buddy King Khalifa starts marching his forces and starts marshaling them and having them start trading towards my forces. The first thing he does, if you look at the bottom of the page there, he marches up his cavalry to kind of come up behind the rear axis of my units. That way he can charge me from behind. At the same time, he also does a quick combat reform real quick with his handgunners and kind of wheels them around the other side of that standing stone, so that way they're facing my flank on my left-hand side. He also does a quick swift reform with his halberdiers as well, turns them over 90 degrees, and just has them move up their normal 4 edges, so that way they can get themselves set for a nice little flank charge. And then my opponent also marches up his archers their full 8 inches and swings them around, so that way they can also shoot him as well, because those guys are skirmishers and that's what they do best. And then of course the cannon just stays exactly where it's at. As you can see, my forces of spearmen now are being completely surrounded at this point, and things are not looking very good for me. In the magic phase, my buddy just totally dominates on this one again. He also casts Flesh to Stone as well as Thorn of Vines onto his units, so now his units all have 4 up to their toughness. He also decides to cast Shield of Thorns onto his unit of handgunners as well, so if I do decide to react against those handgunners, I have to charge into Strength 4 Thorns, which is never a good idea. And as you see in the picture on the bottom of the page here, with his lore attribute, for every single time he casts a life spell, you generate 1 wound for a unit within 12 inches. As you can see that because my buddy cast so many spells, he brought back that unit of knights back to its full strength. So now all that shooting I did in the previous turn was absolutely bumkus at this point. So with magic phase over, you go directly to the shooting phase. In the shooting phase, my opponent takes aim with his archers as well as his cannon armed with grape shot. And as you can see in this photo, he cuts that unit of spearmen almost down in half. It was absolutely devastating to see how much firepower he was able to bear with that cannon. Also, oddly enough, my opponent was rolling out of the box for his wound rolls as well as his hit rolls for his archers. Nothing but 5s and 6s for the most part. So because of that, he was able to kill a lot of my forces, which is absolutely demoralizing. And as this part of the battle report, I realized there's no way I can recount my losses and try to save the day at this point, which is not such a big deal because I am the game master for this campaign, so if I lose, it's not such a big deal because I'm not participating in the campaign per se. So because of that, I just kind of concede the game at this point, and King Khalifa automatically wins because I surrendered. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, this battle report is now officially over. We're going to go directly to the after action report and talk about exactly what's happening for King Khalifa at the end of this round of the campaign so far.
I thought about staying. They offered me the chance to lead them, to teach them, to be king.
Uh-huh.
But my place is here, so I swallowed the juice, said the words, and here I am.
Did you say the words right this time?
Well, maybe I didn't say every single tiny little syllable, no, but basically I said them, yeah. Basically.
Alright folks, now it's time for the after action report. This is the part of the battle report we talk about what went well, what went poorly, and what we can learn from the next time that we do battle. This is the after action report from Mighty Empire's campaign, battle report number 1 on this part, and it being a victory for my buddy King Khalifa. So let's go and talk about the losses real quick. For my losses, I lost my Wanderers as well as my 2 Eagle Claw Throwers. King Khalifa, on the other hand, he lost the Vagrant Brotherhood, and that was all he really lost for his military forces. In the end, my buddy King Khalifa gains hex number 60 as well as 61 as well. Not only did he gain those 2 hexes, but in those 2 hexes were also major terrain features. He earned himself a set of woods as well as a city, so now that city can really drum up another support. Cities are really, really important in this campaign because that gives him access to another lord as well as a hero choice, as well as special and rare choices as well, making his empire grow very, very rapidly in this case. Also, because of the amount of damage my opponent was causing in this battle report for his general, he actually gained 3 experience points in this battle, which allows him to gain advances. He decided to go with a magical advancement because his general is a wizard, and as a reward for that, he can now reroll 1 cast die or 1 dispel die per magic phase at every single battle report. So very, very excellent kind of skill ability there attached for his troop as well. So ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for this one. Remember, we are doing our Mighty Empires campaign, so we have other further battle reports to do later on before we end up with turn number 1. As always, you guys, check us out on Google+, Facebook, as well as Instagram for all the latest and greatest about our hobbies so you can see exactly what's going on. And also, please feel free to like, comment, and or subscribe because your guys' input is always invaluable. So that's going to do it for this one, you guys. You guys stay classy. We will catch you on the flip side. Peace out.